So we've been talking about these experiences very much from an individual's perspective. I mean, as you described, self-transcendence. But I'm wondering if there is an ethics to awe or wonder as well. I mean, does it make the world better? Does it make us better people if we have these experiences?
Depends on the object.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Depends on the object of awe.
I mean, I think when I think of some of the most important social revolutions that we've been through, right, as a world, like the fight for civil rights, right, that there was an awe to that movement. There was a feeling of unity towards something greater than the self that transcended each individual, that brought everybody together to move this larger mission forward. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. But for that, you also have, as we mentioned before, these dangerous situations where people have cults of personality, and that cult leader says, you will do this thing for me that might, at an individual level be something that goes against their ethical code. But again, because they feel part of this greater, mission or collective, they're willing to do things they wouldn't otherwise do.
Well, you watch some of the old video reels of Nazi rallies, Hitler up there. I mean, that seems like an experience of awe there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I often think of the Jonestown Massacre, where people willingly committed suicide at the behest of their leader, right? Something that just goes against every bone in most people's body, right, to survive. And I think that really suggests that awe can be this powerful tool for cultural transformation, but it can also be dangerous. And it may depend to a large degree on the leader and what that leader is going to use that emotion that they've cultivated for. So if you can predict that, you might be able to tell which direction it will go. But like anything, I think it has power for good and evil.
But you were also saying earlier that this seems to contribute to a lot of pro-social behaviors. I mean, for instance, when people have experiences of awe, they seem to be more generous.
We have seen that. I would like more data, because a lot of that work is in response to nature, where you look out over this beautiful vista and it creates this connection with other people, and that, is part of this small self, and that promotes this pro-social response. But I would like to see it in some group settings, in some maybe even religious settings, if there's some kind of conflict, intergroup conflict. Because in those settings, I'm not sure you would see the same thing. I could easily imagine a situation where you feel awe in this very strong group setting, and you feel part of this collective, and now there's another group that you perceive to be threatening your group. And that all could actually exacerbate the lack of empathy and maybe the aggressive, hostile tendencies you'd have towards another group. So I think these are really hard questions to test, and they're not very well suited to the lab. And I think it's incumbent on us as scientists to grapple with those questions. And what you're seeing is like beta version awe. And we're going to have to keep, as science does, moving forward. And I think later iterations, you'll see some more nuance, is my guess, to this idea that it's always a pro-social emotion, always promoting this morally righteous outcome that we see as desirable.
Yeah, and I would add to that by saying that no matter where the future research in psychology takes us, we'll never be able to answer that particular part of the question, right? So we can describe how awe, for example, motivates us to fold into a social collective, to cooperate with others, but to then say, and that's a good thing, and that's a bad thing. Well, that would just be us, putting our philosopher caps on for a second, and then immediately taking it off.
Well, that's what I do in my work.
Right,
I say there's good kinds and there's bad kinds. I mean, I'm an ethicist, so I make normative claims, and I think that I'm not surprised that people, when their wonder is sort of oriented towards nature, that brings out some of that generosity. Because I wouldn't want to overstate this, but I think wonder needs to have as its sort of ultimate object something beyond the human. So something like nature or, a kind of spiritual realm. Because I think wonder always exists in society, but it goes underground or it gets perverted in some way. It will find objects. And, we have in some sense, we have an abundance of wonder right now in terms of our kind of, techno fascination, a kind of, technophilia that I think is potentially dangerous, because it's not clear what will place limits on the pursuits of technology and certain kinds of science, things like gene editing. I mean, without having wonder express itself, orient itself towards something that is understood to be inherently valuable, it just becomes that kind of puzzle-solving serial wonder, which just moves from one thing to the next.